This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free Creativity Blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In today's episode, I speak with Stephen Morris, and we talk about brand strategy, curiosity and creativity, and why open plan offices can be bad for creativity. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to welcome onto the show Steve Morris. Steve Morris is a brand evolution strategist, speaker, author, painter, and designer. He speaks and writes on evolved brands, curiosity, beautiful business, and humanized workforces. He's the author of 2 books and has a new one in the works entitled The Evolved Brand. Steve has been honored to work with more than 250 plus global and national companies and 2,300 plus business leaders over the past 24 years. He believes that leadership and business done well can be an act of artistry and an expression of beauty. When he's not on stage or roaming the globe advising clients, he can be found in his painting studio, in the surf, or on the trails, running the canyons of Southern California. And it's my great pleasure to have Steve with us today. So welcome, Steve.
James, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Well, as you know, the introduction, as you talked about, one of my main day job, if you will, is advising clients globally for the brand evolution work that I do, and so that can take lots of different forms. Typically, when an organization is at their point or apex of change, then they call someone like me, and I help them think through their most deeply held beliefs and help not just evolve the brand of the organization, but also work with the cultural side of things and then ultimately with the brand expression side of things. So that's like the main thing that I'm doing. I'm also working on, I do a lot of talks, and a lot of my talks are around the topics of curiosity. And I'm also beginning to talk about this concept called a beautiful business, which I'm pitching TED Talks right now for that. And I think I've made it to the finals of 4 different TED Talks. So we'll see what pans out in that particular round. So those are the main things that I'm up to.
So where did this all begin for you? Did you kind of come straight out of college, getting straight into the world of branding, or did you take a circuitous route into what you do today?
Yeah, I'm trained both as a fine artist and as a designer. So my undergraduate degree is in fine art and painting, but I also have minors in philosophy, psychology, and sociology. So really, I've always been fascinated with the way that we as humans both evolve and what drives us, what really motivates us to do what we're doing. But I especially look at that through the lens as a creative, which I am at heart. So, and then I went on to get my master's degree in design from Temple University, Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia. So it's an MFA in design. And really back then, it was back in the day before design thinking was a thing. And it was all about design thinking. So, one of my pet peeves these days is that all of a sudden design thinking is all of a sudden this big hot button where really from my perspective, when one thinks as a creative or as a designer, we're always thinking design and design thinking processes, and we're infusing everything that we're doing within that realm into both the work environment and into the creative aspects of what we're doing.
Now, one of the interesting things I noticed about your work, which is maybe different in terms of if I look at other, let's say branding, advising companies or branding companies, is that a lot of them very much focus on you're talking about the expression, the final things, the logos, for example. You kind of come at it from a different kind of standpoint. You talk about these 3 pillars, these 3 stages of where you take people through. But the other thing that you link very, very closely is the idea of brand and profitability. So can you tell us a little bit more, how is developing a brand, having a good brand, how does that relate to profitability?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth talking a little bit about how I approach it and then how that feeds into profitability. So when I work with organizations, I'm working first with the leaders of those organizations and helping them really mine the big question, which is why do they exist on the first place. So if we assume that any business is going to make money and be profitable, that's fine and good. And for some businesses, it's completely fine and okay to say, I'm in business only to make money. But I would bet dollars to donuts that most of the companies on this planet are in business to actually make an impact on the lives of their customers. So do something larger than just make money. Now, making money is non-negotiable. So as we think about those things and ask about what the purpose for the business is, we also have to then begin to answer that question and then begin to think about, well, if we're in business to achieve a particular purpose, then that purpose has to be designed to create some value for the lives of your customers. So, and I believe that when businesses are focused in that particular perspective and they're really hyper-focused on providing that value, then profitability is going to increase, because if they actually serve that customer, and we can see it in what Tesla is doing now. We can see it in the difference between, say, Southwest Airlines and their utter commitment to serving the customer versus some other airlines who are just kind of booking and filling seats and things like that. That service to the customer has created for Southwest Airlines much higher profitability in the airline industry than many of their competitors, because they're focused on serving that purpose. And so this idea of creating deep value and really impacting, changing, and improving the lives of customers is what I mean by profitable business. Because if you do that, you do that well, you create loyalty, brand loyalty, and customer loyalty, and that's going to create much more profitability within your organization.
So you must get frustrated when clients then come to you and say, we're needing some branding, we're needing some logos done.
Yes.
You're going to kind of pull them back to that why, and you talk about these three stages that you work with clients, and obviously some clients will just work at one stage, where the other ones will kind of be going through multiple stages as well. And those, there's, I seem to remember, like talking about the brand strategy, and then the brand kind of evolution of the brand, and then finally the brand expression. Can you talk about like what each of those stages are? Because I think this is useful, even if someone is watching this, listening to just now, and isn't bringing on a branding company to help them with that, just kind of understanding what is good to happen at each of these stages, it would be a very useful thing.
Yeah. So to your point, what I would not actually take on a client who just wants a visual update to their brand, because typically the organizations, when they're looking at their business and there's some outside influence that's really kind of forcing them or really instigating the need for a brand evolution, what I want to do with them is really understand what those outside forces are and how, as a business, from a business strategy standpoint, are they responding to those outside sources. So then how does then the brand tether into the business strategy of that organization? So then it all starts with the beliefs, and then really refining those beliefs and capturing those in a meaningful way that then turn into the culture of the organization, so that the people who are the brand ambassadors throughout the organization, no matter how big or small it is, they're actually representing the brand in a meaningful and authentic way. And then only at that point, much further downstream, typically 3 to 6 months into it, do we even think about the updated brand expression, or what we consider the logo and the identity, and all the imagery that comes with it, and things of that nature. So really what I'm helping them do is tether their brand, which is really the offering to the world, with their business strategy, and bringing those two things together so they're as tightly knit as possible.
And we've all experienced probably that sensation of working with an airline or being somewhere in a retail store, and it just feels completely aligned. It has, it's like everything. And I was somewhere the other day actually, and it was a hotel, a very high-end hotel. And I was actually doing a walkthrough with the manager, the general manager of this hotel, through the hotel. And he was pointing out to me, we were talking about the brand values of that organization, the mission of the organization. And then he was starting to point out lots of quite subtle things in terms of the fabrics, for example, but also in terms of how people would be greeted. And it all kind of traced its way back to that strategy as well. And it made you feel, it feels congruent in some way. And then we've probably all had the similar, on the opposite experience, when you kind of go in and you go into that reception of something, and on the back of the wall it says, "We're all about," I don't know, integrity or some phrase, and then it's really, really bad service. It feels a complete disconnect. So we've probably all felt that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's those, it's a great set of examples. So it's those two brands. Like if we think about it from a consumer perspective, or even like, you now have a choice between two different kinds of hotels, right? So you chose to go with the hotel that had this deep congruency in the way that they were not just talking about who they were, but the thoughtfulness that they put in everything that you just described, and all the details behind perhaps the fabrics and the curtains and the artwork and the way that they talk to you in the service and things like that. We as customers, we want to have those experiences, and we're actually willing to pay more money for those things because it makes us feel better and it improves our lives in certain ways. And those other brands who the continuity doesn't exist, or there's actually deep inauthenticity where they come across and they say one thing, but they actually do something very different. You see lots of customers now turning away from those things because we all have options on which kind of company we want to work with.
Now, I know something you're really passionate about, you're very interested in, especially when it comes to creativity, is this idea of curiosity. Kind of curious mind. So this is something I know you've kind of written about. I know you thought very deeply about as well. So, I mean, where did the curiosity for this subject of curiosity come about? Yeah. And then what were some of your findings in doing that research?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if you guys, so it's a global network of presentations, and it's called Creative Mornings, and it was founded outside of New York in New York, and now there's Creative Mornings all over the world. And what they do is that, and any given month they have a theme, and so whether you're in Tokyo or London or New York or San Diego, all the people who are going to present on stage talk on that particular theme. So I was asked to give a presentation, this was back in February of this year, on the theme of curiosity. So it really got me thinking deeply about, well, what does curiosity have to do with what we do as creatives, since we're really talking in that particular context to creative professionals and entrepreneurs, and why is it important? And so really the finding that I came to is that curiosity is kind of the operating system for anyone's creative life. And in a way, it's also the antidote to what we have with these screens that we're constantly affixed to in our world right now, which is all about distraction. So this sense of presence, where we can have deep presence with the things that we're leaning into and the problems that we're solving from a creative standpoint. And curiosity is really an aspect of deep noticing. And so when we're creative professionals, we're constantly being asked to put together things that are either different or unusual and things like that. And so the heavier questions that we ask, the deeper the questions we ask, and the more distractions we take out of our way, the more we can get deeply curious about the individuals we're working with, about the questions that we're asking ourselves, and about how we consider how we approach what we do in our creative life. So curiosity is this state of dynamic neutral, where we can suspend all the things that we already know. So a lot of us, and probably a lot of people that are listening to this particular podcast, are experts at what they do. The challenging thing is that you can have expertise, but you can't learn anything if all you're doing is talking and all you think you do is know. So you have to actually suspend all the stuff that you think you know and deeply listen to those people or that information that's coming at you, and ask yourself, what value does this have, and what am I learning from it, or what can I apply from what I'm learning from it into whatever I'm working on in my creative life? So I think this curiosity thing is so important in this day and age.
And it must be hard. I mean, it's one of the reasons probably you're brought into companies and organizations is they've maybe kind of lost their way over the years, and they perhaps want someone to bring someone in with a bit more of that beginner's mind, in order taking a fresh look at the brand that has that sense of curiosity. Well, why is it like that? And what was the reason? And what was it? So you part of your skill set, I'm guessing, is being able to ask those questions that maybe they just hadn't thought about. It was there, but they hadn't really thought about it for a long time, because maybe this company had merged with this other company and they'd kind of lost their way a little bit.
Yeah. So it's interesting, James. I was reading, I think it was Fast Company this morning, and do you know the author Dan Pink?
Yes, Dan Pink.
So he was quoting something that was saying that we have this new office style that it's kind of a global thing, but I know it's mostly in Western cultures that it is more of an open office. So no more cubicles. Let's just take all the cubicles down and let's instigate a little bit more interaction between people. Well, the study was saying that these open office environments actually diminishes the one-on-one human-to-human communication, and it increases the amount of email that people utilize with one another. And I got very curious about, well, why is that? Why are we, even in an open office environment, not having these face-to-face or deeper conversations where it used to happen around the water cooler, so to speak, where you'd bump into so-and-so who was from a completely different department, and you'd all of a sudden have a conversation about a project that you're working on and a project that they're working on and how they dovetail together. Even in these open office environments, that's not happening. And I believe that that's not happening because there's so much digital communication, and it really, it's very difficult for me to ask you a question and have immediate response back and forth, a dialogue between you and I, if we're doing that via email, or even if we're doing it via instant message or something like that. Like Slack is a little bit different, where you can actually exchange via Slack, but nothing gets around that face-to-face conversation, face-to-face communication.
It's interesting as well when you see, obviously, social media companies are really skilled at being able to keep you addicted, keep you attracted to it through everything, and it's interesting seeing it in terms of chemical levels, how they change when you get a ping notification. Stress levels actually go up when you get that ping, whether it's that email ping or that even Slack, Slack ping. You actually can see it that kind of going up.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing that also causes problems, those kind of open plan offices where Paul Graham from 500 Startups talks about these differences between creators' time and managers' time. That manager's time where you're breaking it to 5, 15-minute, 30-minute, hour chunks. And that's good for getting lots of interactions, your meetings done. But he said for the creative work, whether that's a coder, a designer, musician, author, whatever the work is, you need those kind of longer periods of deeper time, deeper work. And that is often works best in kind of quieter environments or places where you can just really come in. And that must, those open plan offices must cause a bit of a problem for that.
Yeah, you see everybody, head down with their headphones and no distractions and things like that. And we creatives, we tend to work best in sort of 90-minute blocks. And so uninterrupted time, really putting our focused energy into 90-minute blocks. And then the best thing to do is then to get up and have a little bit of diversion and maybe even think differently, take a 10 or 15-minute break, and then go back into another 90-minute block so you can focus on whatever it is, be it coding or creative or development or whatever.
Now, I'm guessing you're also brought in by companies who they've maybe built a very good brand, a very established brand, and they're now creating a new product, and they're now having to think about sub brands to the mother brand, or however the mothership, or however you want to call it. When you're going in something like that, so they have a very good sense maybe of their brand strategy, and so they're a little bit kind of further along the road. This is really adding something else. How do you ensure that brand sits well with everything else that's going on, and it doesn't feel like it's just another thing, and it doesn't kind of detract, and it adds something to the whole.
Yeah, so this is a fairly big question and big conversation. So if I'm giving advice to people in that particular realm, the first couple of questions that I would ask is, is this new product serving the same audience? One, and if it is not the same audience, then there's certainly some degree of consideration that you should give to a sub-branded area, because if you're serving a different audience or looking to communicate to a different audience, then you have to actually modify the core brand so that you can effectively connect to those people. And then the second question I would have within that is, what is the promise that this particular product actually delivers on to that audience? And so it goes back to, is it the same audience or is it a different audience? And if it's the same audience, is it a different promise? So does it actually solve a different challenge or need in the world of the customer? And if that promise is somehow different, then there is then a consideration for either a sub-brand or a sister brand or something like that. So we can get into a big conversation about what it looks like from a brand hierarchy standpoint, and when a sub-brand works well, or when an organization goes out and they extend their brand too far, and they get away from really the heart and soul of what they're trying to do as an organization. And so the question I would ask a leader in that particular perspective is this new product that you're thinking to put out into the world, does it serve the same purpose that the core brand is looking to serve your main customer segment? And if you're actually talking to a completely different customer segment, so let's go back to Southwest Airlines. And if Southwest Airlines wanted to get into, I don't know, the cafe business for some reason, and they felt that they could still serve customers in the Southwest way in a cafe situation, I would argue that, well, because their whole mantra is all about love, can you really provide love in that particular environment, or does it distract you from what you're actually looking to do in your core main business? So a sub-brand is not just a business consideration, but it's also a customer and a promise consideration.
I was watching a video last night all about The Economist newspaper, and as I was watching, I was thinking about a conversation that we would be having today as well, and that was interesting because they were actually talking about the brand, how that brand of The Economist, a very old brand really, and how it's kind of subtly changed over the years, but it's always had at its core the avatar, the customer that they were serving, and the promise. But obviously now they're across lots of different technology, lots of different platforms, online, offline, events, everything. But it's one of those brands you still sense there's a congress. And one of the things I thought was very interesting is, as they were talking about the brand and the strategy of that brand and how it kind of represents itself in the world, they almost spoke just as much about who they're not for and kind of what they're against. And this kind of leads to, you talk about this thing of the brand manifesto. This idea. So is this something that's being adopted by companies that they're saying, okay, we're gonna create a brand manifesto. Not only are we going to say who we're for, but we're going to say what we're against that's happening in the world.
I think it's spot on. I think it's a really important thing to understand the dissection between what you're for and what you're against. And I think there's actually quite a benefit to even identify, and this might be a dangerous thing to say, even identify what the enemy or what you're against, what you stand against, even from a value system standpoint. And what it does is it helps to create a center or a rallying flag around deepening the beliefs of the organization. So if they're pushing against some other belief system that's out there, and it's not like they're actually fighting them, and in fact, that would be a big mistake to actually try and fight another brand that's out there or fight a belief system, but it really says we're for this and we're not for this, and it deepens their conviction for the things that they actually stand for. So this whole brand manifesto type thing it goes back into what we were talking about earlier. What is the purpose for the organization, and what is the value it provides, and what are the beliefs that connects those things together? This brand manifesto ties all those things together in a much more convicted, deeper way.
Now, in your creative journey you've gone through, can you tell us about a time where maybe you've given your heart and soul to a project, you've really worked on something, and for whatever reason it hasn't worked out like you'd hoped, and more importantly, what were the lessons that you took from that experience?
Yeah, there's a lot of those, as we all know. So I think one of the situations that I found myself in was giving a keynote presentation up in San Francisco, and it was one of those situations where I was presenting with another business professional, and it was the opening to an entire particular talk or an entire conference. So it was a Friday night keynote, and it was a weekend-long event, and I don't know, there was 600 or 800 people in the audience, and we showed up a couple hours ahead of time for a sound check and things like that. Everything worked out great, and all of a sudden, 10 minutes into our presentation, everything cut out. Like the mic cut out, the PowerPoint slides that we were walking through cut out, and the whole process of that particular presentation was a linear process, and we were guiding the audience through this process of essentially designing their career and designing their journey and their creative life. And so, we had nothing to go with. So we're essentially on stage now, all of a sudden, like having to try and lean into the audience and connect with them without any, technology tools whatsoever. Now, we knew our content, and so that wasn't the issue. And so it wasn't like we got lost in our slides and things like that. But we wanted to make sure that we took them through that particular journey. And the thing that I realized out of that, James, and I know you do a lot of public speaking, so and this may be actually somewhat of a controversial perspective. I don't actually believe that there's anything called a presentation. I mean, there is obviously a presentation, but really when we're standing on stage, we're looking to have a conversation with the people in the audience. We want to connect with them. We want to understand. We want to figure out how to best serve them and present to them some information that is fed back and forth. So as a presenter, we're constantly feeling or reading into the audience to understand what's in it for them and how do I best reach them. And so one of the things I learned out of this particular creative failure, if you will, is that stay present with the audience and stay deeply attuned with who they are and what they want. And even though we had an intentional journey to take these people on, it allowed us to be a little bit more free in the way that we took them on that journey because of that necessary presence of no more technology incorporated within it. So, you know, I actually think the whole stand and deliver type of presentation is a very difficult thing. I think audiences want that less and less because today in our society, the thing that we crave most are deep human connections and experiences. People want to be moved. And the only way really to be moved and inspired is to have a connection with another human being. And so even though we're asked to stand on a stage and present in a wowful manner this presentation or this content, I'm always looking to connect with people.
I think it's a great point. I think as well, I was recently at a 2,500-year-old Greek auditorium, this Greek where you'd had people speaking at, you know, the day, the orators of the day would have been getting up there pronouncing. And obviously that's how people communicated in that way, you know, and that is it's a certain kind of way. And then as time went on, even in universities and colleges, you used to have, you know, the sage from the stage, as it was called, you know, that person up in front, and everyone would, and obviously in education today, it's not really like that anymore. And the other big change that happened is when you move from being like public town hall talks, that was the communication version, to TV. So things went like that for start. So then people had to adapt, and audiences started to get very used to that. It was slightly different. It was more conversational, as you say. So people started getting used, and now with social media, it's even more so having that conversation. That could be a celebrity, but that more kind of conversational style. And yet you've still got speakers that are going up there into the stage thinking they're Socrates and going up and giving some big pronouncement when that would work very well for that era. But we're in a different time, and it's having that. And I think, you know, I think a lot of speakers are learning from comedians and rock musicians and people as well, and seeing how it's not that you go complete, it's not having like a one-on-one conversation, but it's understanding the energy that's in the room, ensuring that you're kind of playing with that energy. And my heart goes out to yourself and any speaker when that happens, when all the tech goes down. I was talking to someone, I actually learned a technique from someone recently. I had to use it, unfortunately, recently. I was speaking in Singapore and exactly the same thing happened. And I was like, you know, you can think, what do you do? And I remember a speaker many years ago had something similar. And what his slides went, the clicker that went. So his slides wouldn't advance. So he all he did, he didn't miss a beat. He turned to the sound or the technology people, the AV people, and he just said, hey, every time I pull my earlobe, just change the slide. And I thought, that's brilliant. It's so simple, so old school, and I ended up doing it. But my heart goes out to you because it's when you've sweated blood over creating some great, as you said, you were going to it in a linear way. That's very hard then to break out. But you know, congratulations to you for having got through that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, you're surviving something like that. You learn a lot from it, and it builds character at the same time. And James, I love what you brought up about stand-up comedians. Like, I love studying some really great stand-up comedians and how, you know, while they have like their kind of routine that they're going to go through, they're always, the really great ones are always really reading the audience. And there's this react and respond, this play that goes back and forth, and you can actually feel the energy. And sometimes, like, some of the really good ones will actually intentionally lose the audience in order to regain their attention. And that's just a creative act, and I just love it.
Yeah, and also those comedians are also going to people's curiosity, because you're taking on a journey. It's going, the setup is going one way, and then you've it's like, oh, this is, and then you flip it and you take them to a completely different place, and you get that little rush of, dopamine probably is probably the chemical that comes out as well. So as you were kind of going on your creative journey as well, was there a key insight, a key aha moment or light bulb moment for yourself where you went, okay, this is the direction I want to go with my work, or these are the people I want to serve, or you just made a very important distinction in your work?
Yeah, I love that question, and I want to answer that question with some delicacy, because James, I've had the honor to work with some really fantastic and very large global brands, and I learned this was an experience that I had about 5 years ago with a very big global brand. And they were asking us to do this big brand program for them and actually launching a new product, a sub-brand, to your question. And we found ourselves, or I found myself, in a situation with the leaders of that particular organization that they were doing it only for the money. And I really started to lean into, wow, how do I build a meaningful and authentic brand that actually serves a customer that I believe ought to be served if they're going to be asking for money from these folks? How can I build this in a meaningful, authentic way when all they wanted to do was prop up this something visually cool, but didn't have the substance to it? And I knew too much about the product at that point that it wasn't going to serve the needs. So at that point, I made the decision, while we finished the project and all that kind of thing, I made the decision to really only do work with organizations that were actually providing great value through their product and their services. So a lot of the work that I do with the organizations now is I'll do some due diligence up front, making sure that there's deep, meaningful authenticity in the way that they approach their work, and even to the extent of the way that they treat their people and their culture. Like, I'll turn down work with organizations that have a reputation for a really bad culture with a lot of turnover, and they burn through people, or they treat people poorly, or back to your point where they have a reputation for saying one thing and doing something completely different, unless they've raised their hand and said, look, we're really looking for a change. So it was really at that point 5 years ago where I wanted to deeply commit to doing work with organizations and businesses that truly wanted to evolve and work with a purpose and provide real value out into the world.
So let's go to quick fire questions just now. I'm interested, Are there any online tools, things like Evernote, for example, that you find really useful in doing the work that you do? Or maybe mobile apps or online tools?
Yeah, so I use Evernote a lot. So thanks for bringing that up. And what I do with Evernote is I do a lot of writing, and I categorize my writing concepts into different buckets. And so, like most people, I'll have ideas when I'm out on the trail running or something like that. And so when I have an idea for a particular topic that I want to either present on or write a blog about or something like that, I'll just speak it into Evernote. I'll speak the title into Evernote. I'll put in 2 or 3 bullet points of what I think that topic is going to be. And then I send it off into Evernote, and then I organize it. And so when it's time for me to write, then I go back into the tool itself, and I have like all these prompts of, oh, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about this, like this, all kinds of different subjects that I'm thinking about. And then it just feeds me, and I'm in writing mode, and I just go back into that thing. There's another tool that I just learned about and I just started experimenting with, and it's a tool called Otter. And I can send you the link after this. And what it does, it's a tool where you can record a live conversation like we would be having right now, or a meeting that I might have, and it immediately transcribes it into text. So I can actually have a conversation with somebody in a meeting. Like, let's say I'm talking to a CEO and I get their permission to record the conversation, so I don't have to take every note that they're saying. But then I have all my notes directly in front of me to be able to capture that. It's really awesome.
Very cool. And so that is so I use something like rev.com in order to transcribe. So that's something that's just very simple, just on your phone. You just kind of hit the record button and it just has it transcribed. I'm wondering what's the levels of accuracy for something like that?
It's pretty good. I've only been playing with it for a couple of weeks, but so far it's really good. Yeah. They might get like a name spelling wrong sometimes, but so far I love it.
I love that idea as well. Also internally in organizations. Ray Dalio, who has one of the most successful hedge fund managers in the world, I was just reading his book Principles, and he talks about that every meeting that they have in their organization is video recorded. They have cameras everywhere, and the audio is recorded, and it's, like you said, it's all transcribed, and anyone in the organization can watch any of those meetings, with the exception of if it's obviously hiring and firing type of meetings. And so it's this extreme levels of transparency, but it's also extreme levels of knowledge that's being able to get passed around an organization and not being siloed in individual departments or individual places. So I love that. I think that's a very cool idea to be able to kind of quickly kind of transcribe those. What about a book? Is there a book that you would recommend to our listeners? And also, talking about music a little bit earlier, an album that you would recommend to them?
Yeah, so a book, let's see. So Leonardo da Vinci, so if we're talking about the topic curiosity, the new biography on Leonardo da Vinci is just phenomenal. It really outlines and it fully curates the life of Leonardo. And it's a phenomenal read.
That's a big book. That's the Walter Isaacson one, I think.
Walter Isaacson, yeah, he is just the master biographer. But it's so captivating. You know, this dude Leonardo was just like, he is absolutely mind blowing. And you know, you talk about curiosity taken to like the degree that I will never get to. It's just mind blowing how amazing this guy was.
And then what would an album be if you were to recommend one album? Is there maybe something music that you listen to when you're out running on the trail?
Yeah, I don't listen to music when I'm running. It's all about headspace. So let's see. Album-wise, Ray LaMontagne, Part of the Light. It is just absolutely beautiful, and it's one of those journey albums that it takes you fully on a journey of musical exploration. And I find him to be an incredible artist, by the way. He is. I just saw him live here in San Diego, and you know, he's got some old work that's more singer-songwriter stuff. He was so committed to not playing any of the old stuff that he was like, look, this is where I am as an artist right now, and I'm going to feed you the music that I'm loving at this point. So I just have a lot of respect for that.
Fantastic. I'll put all of these links here on the show notes as well. So I've got a final question for you, Steve. I want you to imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. So you have all the tools, all the skills you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you and you know no one. What would you do? How would you restart?
I don't know. I think most of us as creative, we get a little too hung up on tools, techniques, and craft. I think most of us who are really good at creatives, and this is some of the best creatives I know, and this is entrepreneurs and otherwise, we're always walking around with the things that we think, we know, and we believe. So what I would do is I would essentially, so let's say my computer blew up and I have no files and no nothing, no books anymore, things like that. I would capture or begin to capture all the things that I have up here that I believe and that I think are valuable to people out into the world. And I would start to talk to people in a way that serves their organization. And I would talk about the ideas that I think about, much like we talked about here today, but in a way that what's in it for them and how I can help their organization. And I would talk to as many people in a free and service-oriented manner that I possibly can, and just essentially build on that. And I think anyone can restart a business that way. Anyone can restart a creative journey that way.
Absolutely. And Steve, if people want to reach out to you, maybe to learn more about your branding practice, or to watch, I know you're doing a lot more kind of speaking now as well, and also you're writing your blogs. Where's the best place for them to go and do that?
So the-degree.com, and that's where my main site is. It talks about everything that I've done there for the most part. And then the other business that I'm involved in is I co-founded a business called The Studio with two partners, a poet and a musician, an Irish musician and a poet out of Seattle. And it's called studioleadership.com. And what we're doing is we're working with leaders and infusing artistry into the leadership environment and helping leaders kind of double down on their own version of artistry through entrepreneurship.
Very cool. I love the sound of that. So I'm going to put all these links below. People go to jamestaylor.me. Just type in Steve Morris and you'll be able to find all of these links that we've been speaking about today. Steve, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all about your creative life. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I wish you all the best, both with your branding work, your speaking, and actually all your running as well, which I know you do a lot of.
Thank you so much, James. Pleasure talking to you. Love your show, and congratulations on everything you're doing.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.